Okay, so now we're up to the second half of our presentations this morning, and our first speaker is Bhakta Prabhu. So Bhakta, otherwise known as Reverend Albert Lang, is the Vaishnava Minister of Religion for ISKCON Melbourne. He is currently ISKCON Australia's Communications Minister, for which he incorporates areas of service such as spiritual care provision and training, establishing and maintaining interfaith connections and also Hindu connections Australia-wide. So together with his wife Bhakti, Bhakta has dedicated many years to developing our various Australian yatras and has contributed significantly to creating ISKCON's public relations profile within Australia. So today he's going to be speaking on a topic of communicating compassion. Please welcome to the stage His Grace Bhakta Prabhu.
Something that I was going to do anyway, that should have been done in the beginning, is to pay our respects to the owners of this land, the previous custodians of this land, the Bunjalong community, the Aboriginal community, both their elders, past and present. This is an important thing for us to do from now on. We're a community and we're interrelating with so many other people, and even though it may be the majority of devotees here, it is important that we show that we're part of the broader community as well. We had a gentleman here that is working with the Indigenous people. So at every function that I attend, there is always that respect offered to those custodians of the land of which we're engaging. So that's just a little thing from here on, from a public relations point of view. I wanted to talk about communicating compassion. Compassion is actually the life force for devotees, that energy within us to actually help people, that karuna. We can learn a little bit. I've broken this up into a couple of different sections. First one is about learning compassion from history. Whenever we get an opportunity to hear about a compassion, way to present compassion, reading books about it, attending seminars like this where there's a spirit of coming together and helping, we should be eager to learn more about compassion and build our knowledge about how to respect other people and to give compassion to people. It should be a lifetime habit, but it doesn't stop there. We actually have to engage in compassion on a daily basis. This is something that we actually have to force ourselves to do, because it's not in our nature, really, in a sense, to be compassionate. So we actually have to trick ourselves and really make a point of being compassionate and friendly to as many people as we can. You can't learn to drive a car by just reading a manual. We actually have to hop behind the wheel and actually drive it. So this is very important. It is the same with compassion. We have to learn the neurological makeup of the brain and how it reacts to acts of compassion, or we can understand the requirements of our cultural or spiritual tradition. But until and unless we actually modify our behaviours and learn to think and act towards others in accordance with the Golden Rule. Is everybody here familiar with the Golden Rule? Yeah? Can anybody tell me what's the Golden Rule? Huh? Close. Yes, exactly. So the Golden Rule I deal a lot with interfaith, I deal a lot with other religious traditions. It is there in every faith tradition. So through scientific studies, we have seen that there are brain mechanisms and hormones that induce such positive emotions as love, compassion, gratitude and forgiveness, but they are not as powerful as our more primitive instinctual reflexes, such as eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So we're constantly having this battle with ourselves to be more compassionate, more grateful, but we're fighting against these base sort of elements. Great sages of all traditions understood that it was possible to reorientate the mind by putting some distance between their thinking souls and these necessary but possibly destructive instinctive behaviours and find peace within them. How do they do this? They do this through meditation, through prayer, through contemplation, through walking. Just being peaceful. The peace discovered by the sages was more than merely relaxation. They realised the true nature of what is meant to be a human. That being, we are spiritual beings having a material experience, and we should always act with compassion. In Krishna consciousness, we understand that we're not these bodies, but we're spirit souls. In the Mahabharata, the ancient epic of India, we're all familiar with that, there is a discourse in which a wise minister Vidura is instructing King Yudhisthira, quote, "All the worlds are balanced on Dharma. Dharma encompasses ways to prosperity as well. O King, Dharma is the best quality to have. Wealth is a medium quality. Desire is the lowest, and that's karma. Hence, keep these in mind. By self-control and by making right conduct your focus, treat others as you treat yourself, is the utmost of importance." There is a story attributed also from another spiritual tradition about the Hebrew sage called Hillel. Hillel was a contemporary of Jesus. It is said that a pagan approached Hillel one time and promised to convert to Judaism if he could recite the entire Quran, wrong tradition, Torah, whoops, that's a big one, while he stood on one leg. So this pagan said, "I'll become a Jew if you recite the Torah standing on one leg." Hillel replied, quote, "What is hateful to yourself, do not do to your fellow man." And he stopped. He said, "The whole Torah and the remainder is simply a commentary. Go study it." Compassion seems to have been the central theme for Christian ethos from the beginning. Jesus believed in the commandment to love God with all your heart and soul and your neighbour as yourself. This was the most exalted commandment that he felt that was there in the Torah. The Gospels show him actually practicing this, showing concern for everyone, reaching out to sinners, prostitutes, lepers, the mentally ill, epileptics, so many different people. He was reaching out to them. There are many examples of this compassion to others in all varieties of spiritual teachings of the world, including many indigenous teachings, including our own Australian indigenous culture, where profound compassion to others was and is central. It's interesting to note that within our Australian indigenous community, there were never over 40,000 years any major wars within this community in Australia. Sages and prophets and mystics of the past were innovative thinkers. They were ready to use their tools to lay at their hands in order to reorientate the human mind, insisting that every person had the ability to reform themselves and become an icon of kindness, selflessness, empathy in a world that seems ruthlessly self-destructive. We need that energy and conviction today. Especially also within our movement, we need that compassion in everything that we do within Krishna consciousness. What is compassion really? Compassion is the recognition of and the desire to alleviate a living entity's suffering. The research, this is an interesting research. Research on a small baby has shown that they spend just 5 seconds looking at the harsh and cruel punch in a typical Punch and Judy puppet show, and 35 seconds looking at the compassionate and kind puppet instead. We are innately wired to prefer compassionate kindness. Unless our brains have been damaged or we have severe negative conditioning in childhood, we all have the innate potential to be compassionate towards others. We feel compassion for someone. When we feel compassion for someone, we become more deeply connected to them. Now, I've had the privilege over the last 5 or 6 years, no more, nearly 10 years, to work in the field of chaplaincy, which is not called chaplaincy anymore. Now it is called spiritual care provision. because people have recognised there are so many different cultures within Australia, and to term it in a Christian way is not applicable, so spiritual care provision. I honestly recommend that would be the best thing for everybody to do. For me personally, to be involved in chaplaincy and spiritual care has been the most uplifting thing and the most rewarding thing that I could have done with my Krishna consciousness. It has changed my perspective on life and dealing with people. It's quite interesting. Sometimes I've told this story so many times. I'm technically the spiritual care provider for the Hindu community. So you go into a hospital and I go to patient's bed, they give you a list of here are the Hindus and you go to see them, and most of them are young sort of people and they can relate to you, some can't. It's really quite interesting. Sometimes, because of the immigration that's coming into Australia, there are many older Hindu people here now, mothers and fathers, and they're in hospital. And sometimes you go into the hospital and there's this little old frail Indian lady lying in her bed. And I come up, 6'5", big guy, white as anything, and I say, good evening, or good afternoon, madam, I am the Hindu chaplain for this hospital. And the woman looks up from her bed and she looks me up and down and looks down and says, oh no, you're not. And I say, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram. He's gone. It's all okay. So interesting. Being compassionate also makes us emotionally intelligent, which has been shown to have significant benefits to several aspects in our lives, and is regarded as being more important than being academically intelligent, emotionally intelligent. If we take responsibility for shifting our thoughts and feelings from our predominant negative default position into an internally positive state, we can change the ways in which our brain and body functions. We can also perceive our inner and outer worlds more clearly and accurately too. So it actually develops your Krishna consciousness. It actually develops by being compassionate and open to people, and it actually allows you to become more Krishna conscious. Our brains are built for change and are shaped by our thoughts and feelings and beliefs. It was found that just 7 hours of compassionate thought and practice was enough to make new neurons fire and wire together to reshape the brain accordingly. That's what you were pointing out, Dhanvantari. Huh? Yeah, it's amazing when you read the scientific research of just being a positive and emotional, empathic sort of person, how that actually changes your whole physiology and brain structure. The positive emotions of compassion, love, care and appreciation have been shown to lead to a more healthy, coherent heart, and to which the brain can also respond. And having a coherent heart rhythm then activates more of these pleasurable emotions in a wonderful feedback loop. So if you actually outreach and you show empathy to people and you actually force yourself to be a little bit more compassionate, the feedback that you get is just so overwhelming, and the state of happiness that you feel in that is wonderful. It is said that the greatest challenge to compassion is the brain's vulnerability to define the self by boundaries of skin as being separated and isolated. We are in our own little pocket. I'm black, I'm white, I'm Hindu, I'm Christian, I'm female, I'm male, I'm human, I'm animal, like that. Self actually is plural, and science is now finding this out. We are all made of the same stuff. We all feel, we need, we want, we dream, we aspire, and we all deserve compassion for our inevitable struggles along the way. As was pointed out through the mental health talk just before, we are all vulnerable. We all need help. Focusing upon others with compassion enhances our own well-being, as does focusing compassionately upon ourselves as well. People treat you badly because they are suffering themselves. And this is something that we should remember also within our devotee care situation. People treat you badly because they are suffering themselves. So sometimes we've just been through the AGM, some of my colleagues here, and there are always been criticisms of management, and he does this and she does that and this and that. But actually those people that are perhaps giving you a hard time are also suffering themselves. And realising this helps us to become more compassionate towards them. Be more compassionate towards them. Instead of confronting it, be more compassionate towards them, no matter how annoying or hurtful they may be. They just don't know any better yet. Be kinder and show compassion to such difficult people actually makes you stronger in spite of them. The area I also wanted to cover was self-compassion, which was mentioned briefly by some of our people that spoke today. We can feel and express compassion both for others as well as towards ourselves. Sometimes it's easier to show compassion to someone else than it is to show compassion to ourselves. So many times we have to deal, as senior devotees, we're talking about the mentoring program, so many times we have to deal with younger devotees and older devotees that have conflicts within themselves. They feel guilty about something within their past or something about their devotional career. So this is sometimes a thing that we have to deal with. Having compassion for yourself could save your life, or at least elongate it. The inner stress we create is by not treating ourselves with kindness and compassion, affects, among other things, an enzyme in our body called telomerase. Is that it? Did I say it right? Telomerase. Thank you, Bhakti. Which in turn shorten the ends of the telomeres of our DNA strands and thereby reduces our lifespan. Greater compassion results in better self-esteem, and we will then feel a value of worth. From a Krishna conscious understanding, we are all part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Surely that must be the most uplifting thing of all time. Self-compassion is not related in any way to self-indulgent or narcissism, which is concerned instead with defending a fragile and inflated ego. Self-compassion is higher than the base needs of the ego. And I just want to quote this doctor. When you have compassion for yourself and you know yourself to be worthy and someone who wants to be of use to someone else, then the right events and people will come your way, and you will go where your heart calls you to allow you to be there for yourself and for others. And that's why I'm so enthused about the great congregation that we have here in New Govardhan, that people want to contribute to making it better for yourselves and for others. This was Dr. Jean Houston. And I experienced this also so many times in chaplaincy experiences, where you actually make it better for someone else. What does being a compassionate devotee mean? Pure Vaishnavas care deeply. I mean, we can only have the example of His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. You know, he didn't have to come to the West. It was out of compassion for us that he came to the West. Feel the suffering of others in the core of their heart. These people feel, like Prabhupada, felt the core of compassion in the core of their heart. There was an interesting example that I wanted to give, and Bhagavad Ashraya, maybe Atmarama might know. In the early days, Prabhupada used to go for a walk in the botanical gardens in Melbourne. Beautiful gardens. And the devotees used to drive him from our Melbourne temple to the botanical gardens. One time, Chidahari and a couple of other devotees were in the car, and it was Monday morning. And Monday morning, they drive past Flinders Street Station somehow or another, and the devotees, being devotees, they were scoffing at the non-devotees, saying, "Look at them, look at these guys, they're off to work, they're suffering so much, look at that, that guy really looks like he's happy to go to work." And they looked back at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was crying. This is the compassion of a pure devotee. He saw the suffering of mankind. He didn't just see the suffering of us, but he saw the whole of humanity, So the greatest compassionate wish is to lead others away from their suffering once and for all by helping them to go back home, back to Godhead. That's in the core of all our hearts. I was just speaking to Bhagavad Australia. All we want to do is just bring people back home, back to Godhead. Until people reconnect with Krishna and hear how to lead their lives in his service, they will never achieve true happiness free from suffering. Since Vaishnavas aim for that most greatest, most compassionate act of leading people back to the Lord, they can reasonably justify becoming involved. Can they reasonably justify getting involved with charitable acts of more a mundane character? This is often asked. It's also it's been discussions that have been had at the GBC level on so many different levels. Senior Vaishnavas have actually said, is the Food for Life program really beneficial? Shouldn't we just preach and distribute books? Is mental health and care for the others really important? Is it important for us to have spiritual care providers in hospitals, helping different communities, when our prime concern should be just to bring people back home, back to Godhead, give them a book, get them to chant? Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for example, was a preeminent Vaishnava scholar, we all know, and this is a quote from him. Those who think that devotion to God and kindness to the jivas are mutually different from each other and perform accordingly in their lives, such persons will not be able to follow the devotional culture. Will not be able to follow the devotional culture. Their performance are only a semblance of devotion. Therefore, all types of beneficence to others, like kindness, friendliness, forgiveness, charity, respect, and so on, are all included in bhakti. The actions of respect, friendliness, kindness are the very form of love and characteristic portion of bhakti. Charity of medicines, clothing, food, water, etc., shelter during adversities, teachings of academics, spiritual education, etc., are the activities included in the devotional culture. So what we're doing here is part of the devotional culture. A Vaishnava can show compassion on many levels, including, of course, distributing the holy name, literature and prasadam, as well as performing other acts of kindness to relieve the suffering of others. You know, sometimes I'm in a position when I do the chaplaincy and I'm doing spiritual care provision to an Indian person. So many times I've had it that there are other people, you know how in the wards at the moment there are 3 or 4 beds, and they've heard me talking about spiritual life with this Indian person, and they say, "Excuse me, mate, can you come over and talk to me?" And then you get an opportunity to preach to them. I had it also one time where I was in the heaviest, I've mentioned this before one time, it still freaks me out a bit, but at one of the heaviest prisons in Melbourne, and one of the most dangerous part. And there was a boy there who was a devotee, and he had committed a murder, and I was doing some chaplaincy work for him. And when you go into these places, all you get is a little alarm system on your belt. And the wardens say, "Okay, you've got 3 minutes. If something happens, just press the button, and within 3 minutes we'll be there." I thought, oh shit, this is going to be something else. 3 minutes. So anyway, I'm Namaste, Namaste, I went, and I'm preaching to this boy, and this big burly guy comes up. If you think I'm big, this guy was huge. Tats, like my leg was as big as his arm. Tats all over. And he's standing behind me like this, I thought, oh God, here we go. So anyway, at the end of it, I was finished. So, you okay? And I'm looking at this guy. He said, "Hey, mate, come over here and talk to me about that spiritual stuff, will you?" And I thought, wow, you have such an impact. So, a Vaishnava shows compassion on many levels. We have to, especially now, within our Krishna consciousness here in Australia, we have to have a broad understanding of how to present Krishna consciousness to the broader community. We can only do that by showing compassion, by having real empathy, understanding that deep empathy that they're all spirit souls and that they have a right to go back to the spiritual world, but also on a more down-to-earth, everyday level. A gentle hello, a pat on the back, can I help you in any way? That's what's required of us, and people will really appreciate that. I will close with this beautiful quotation again from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. One should be merciful and not cause anxiety to any living entity. The heart should always be filled with compassion for others. Exhibiting mercy to all living entities is one of the limbs of devotional service. So to develop this program of devotee care will no doubt benefit many now and in the future. This is the start. But it will also benefit our own material and spiritual well-being. So thank you very much. I really applaud what you're doing here. You're pioneers in an area that's going to be a very prominent part within ISKCON very soon. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Bhakta Prabhu, for that very inspiring talk. Okay, so now we're going to be hearing from Atmarama Prabhu, who is also pioneering a very special office within ISKCON Australia, namely the Social Justice Office. So Atmarama has been involved in ISKCON managerial affairs more or less for all of his devotional life. In recent years, as the director of the Govinda Valley project in Otford, he has been actively supporting the cause for women in ISKCON. And as a part of Australia's National Council, especially in conjunction with Krishnarupa Prabhu, Australia's Women's Minister, and Bhakta Prabhu, who we just heard from, Atmarama has been advocating for a greater focus by ISKCON on issues of broader community concern, especially in the key areas of social justice and social welfare. So, speaking for the Office of Social Justice Project, please welcome to the stage His Grace Atmarama Prabhu.
Well, obviously, as you can see from the program, I'm not a scheduled speaker. I'm just a bit of a late-minute inclusion, and especially in terms of the work that we've been doing with social justice. I wish I could have had more to report in that regard with this meeting, but there's been some setbacks in terms of the last meeting we had at the AGM, and so therefore it looks like things are going to be a little bit more delayed. So I thought what I'd speak about a little bit more particularly is this sort of juxtaposition between ISKCON as an organisation and ISKCON as a society from a kind of, a perspective that I've obviously had to contend with for, more than 40 years. Sometimes I think, that song, I've looked at life from both sides now, from up and down and still somehow. So you tend to, I worn the managerial hat in ISKCON all of my life, but at the same time I'm involved in community, and especially in the sense of being a householder, and also developing a project now, the Govinda Valley project, which is much more community-based kind of endeavour. So I actually had an inspiration to play this little snippet of Prabhupada speaking to kind of illustrate the point, but I since managed to do everything I could to screw up the possibility of that happening, but in spite of that, it seems to be happening, so I can only conclude that Srila Prabhupada wanted us to hear this. So we're just going to play this.
Wrong criticism.
Are your followers encouraged to
No, first of all, you take your answer one by one. You say against the family. It is wrong. It is wrong propaganda. There are so many families in our society. It is a suicide. There are family members, there are brahmachari, there are sannyasi, manapasta, whatever situation is suitable for you can accept. And in any situation, you can become God conscious. That's a wrong propaganda that we are against families. Here is a wife of the boy, their family. There are so many families. Why do you say like that we are against families?
Okay.
This is wrong. You should note it, especially that this type of criticism is envious. It is not proper. We invite all families, children, husbands, wife, come out, take the sadhana.
I've been accosted at airports, on streets, places like that, by devotees. And I've been told that you operate drug centers and a number of other things.
Actually, I cued it wrong. I knew I had to screw it up somehow or another. Just before Prabhupada began speaking there, he made a very, very strong point. He said, we are a society. And as we know, he coined our movement, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and I think he made it quite clear in his general preaching and the way he tried to develop the movement that he was really thinking in terms of a society, like a completely developed, more or less, I would say, a new civilization. His mission was to create a new civilization, not just a narrowly focused religious society with a particular proselytizing aim. So this is basically the theme of what I was going to speak about, and I've written these points down so I don't go too far off track, so just bear with me. So my first point is that Srila Prabhupada created the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, not the International Organisation for Krishna Consciousness. So in Srila Prabhupada's thinking, ISKCON was ultimately meant to become a four-dimensional society, a synthesis of Dharma, Artha, Karma and Moksha, rather than merely a one-dimensional organisation with a narrowly defined missionary agenda. Srila Prabhupada's vision was to recreate human civilization with Krishna consciousness as the overarching goal, and he saw ISKCON's role as providing the blueprint and inspiration for such a transformation. Consequently, we might reasonably expect that ISKCON's leadership should, in principle, try and lead not just for some people and some things, but for all people and all things, and the ultimate source of direction and resources for the development of a complete society. Yet in this regard, we will find ourselves almost necessarily disappointed. Why should this be so? Firstly, because at its inception, ISKCON's existence was mission-based. In other words, it was intent on creating a spiritual revolution, which entails a kind of military endeavour, and therefore a military style of organisation. At this time, ISKCON was organised and led by monks or renunciants, its followers in effect committed zealots. Though that phase is now far, far less dominant, for example, 40 years ago, the percentage of ISKCON's total income dedicated to book distribution was north of 50%, in accordance with Srila Prabhupada's traditional formula. Today in Australia, at least, it may be less than 2%. So that was the standard formula we worked to in the late 70s, early 80s. 50% of all income had to go to book distribution. Now in the total, I think we turn over about $18 million a year in Australia. Less than 2% goes towards book distribution. Yet the legacy of this period remains with us still, in terms of what is essentially a top-down hierarchical style of management culture. And associated factors that, along with the diminishment of the rapid growth phase of ISKCON's development, a shift has taken place within our overall leadership away from generating growth to consolidating and maintaining what we have. In other words, a shift from inspiration to administration. These days, management, at least at the highest levels, is not so much a generative process as it is a reactive one. As is the case with bureaucracy generally, rather than serving as the wellsprings of progress, it serves in response to the needs and obligations of administration, which are becoming increasingly onerous and burdensome. And as is so often the case in secular politics, instead of being creative and dynamic in pursuit of lofty goals, it tends to act only when sufficient pressure is brought to bear. In other words, instead of continuing as a revolutionary movement focused on growth and expansion, ISKCON has moved toward becoming more of a religious institution in the mould of a conservative church. At ISKCON AGM these days, we no longer discuss what books to print for the coming year or where we will open new centres. Rather, we discuss our corporate affairs, focus on company audits, on problems with regulation and compliance, and do PMIs on whether or not ISKCON should join the National Redress Scheme. So, for those of you who are not au fait with the jargon, PMI means positives, minors, and interesting points. This is in relation to consideration whether or not we should join that redress scheme. I'm happy to report we decided we should. Let's just touch and go for a while. But anyway, and 3 days a year is hardly enough even to do all this. So the basic point I wish to bring out here is that only in limited ways and for various reasons can ISKCON's leadership these days be looked to for leadership, least of all in areas to which it has been traditionally averse, the needs of a civil society. I do not raise these matters necessarily as a point of criticism, though I do think it shows a lack in overall vision, but as a reflection on the way things have changed over time, and perhaps inevitably so. For developing a complete society which Srila Prabhupada envisaged ISKCON becoming, I believe we must increasingly look to initiatives such as this community conference, initiatives coming from the bottom up, not from the top down, and from the growing cadre of mature, experienced devotees who retain not just the inspiration and vision of missionaries, leaders and builders, but the experience and sensitivity and sympathy of those who have lived through and come to understand not just the ultimate concern of religion, being the fourth and final goal of life, but the importance of the other three dimensions of a complete and progressive society, namely the social, economic and political. So, a military, this is ISKCON as an organisation versus ISKCON as a society. A military organisation is by nature mission-focused and gender-averse, whereas a civil society is predicated on the interaction between genders. This leads to the issue of children, their nurturance and upbringing, and the protection and support of women, as the central pivot of the whole project we call civilization. For an organisation or mission, the issue of gender varies between a distraction and a major obstacle. Rather, missions, revolutions, the military endeavour in principle is fundamentally an engagement suited to the unattached male. There is no role for children and no purpose to be defined by their upbringing. The elderly are a burden, and gender interaction is the bane of the endeavour. Even today, there would be certain elements to the right of the ISKCON organisation who believe we have no real business getting involved in caring for such things, or at least they would be prepared to argue the point. A military organisation is by nature mission-oriented. It requires absolute commitment, ideally, of people working as a team that submerges individuality into a collective endeavour for a narrow common purpose. Missions need people like this who are prepared to serve in them, and people like this need missions in which to serve. They need each other and will tend to find each other, and like any organisation will become a society unto itself with its own imperatives, values, vested interests and a determination to preserve itself. Missions are necessarily hierarchical, disciplined, sublimating of the individual, hero worshipping, competitive, idealistic, have a sharp and preferably dangerous edge. In short, everything that appeals to the male ethos. It is no mystery, therefore, that why missionary organisations such as ISKCON tend to attract, support and privilege certain types and devalue or marginalise other types. This is the story as old as history itself. Civil society, on the other hand, the central theme of what we might call human civilization, is a different kind of creature, reflecting much more the feminine ethos of community, collegiality and two-way communication, of horizontal structures and an authority that is more bottom-up than top-down, and with a more supportive and considerate, with more support and consideration for the individual, be it individual units of villages, communities or families, or just individual people. All this is marked by consideration for weakness rather than a regard for strength, be it the weakness of the young, the old, the sick, the poor, the deprived or needy, those who invoke within us a sense of compassion rather than of adulation. In other words, where missions are oriented toward achievement, often at the expense of people, societies are wholly about people and are geared to their welfare. Now, when it comes to welfare, and this is basically, I guess, the point I'm meant to be talking to, there's two things involved, essentially, as compassion and justice. Justice, which is the objective consideration, as well as application of moral right and wrong, must provide the practical framework within which a civil society can operate in a consistent and reliable way in the provision of welfare. Compassion, the natural subjective response that we should automatically have in respect of others, especially those who are suffering or less fortunate, should inform as well as be supported and protected by justice, creating for us a society that not only cares, but is capable of delivering such care in a secure, stable and systematic fashion. Though it is gratifying that ISKCON as an organisation is gradually attempting to show some leadership in respect of social justice, in truth, just like in secular politics, it's more of a heel-dragging operation in response to increasing pressure than an initiative based on real vision. And ultimately, its concerns are directed more to its own protection as an organisation than any specific interest in delivering justice for the welfare and betterment of the community. This is reflective of the more or less axiomatic fact that the military by nature does not relate to, nor much understand or empathise with civil society. In fact, it is not just inherently disinterested in it, but can even be rather contemptuous of it. It is therefore by its nature unsuited to the role of leading either community or civil development, and if it applied itself would probably cause far more harm than good. So what can or should ISKCON as an organisation ideally do in relationship to ISKCON as a society? Well, what can we reasonably expect from the institution of ISKCON to provide for the people of ISKCON? Well, it could certainly do more to encourage the development of ISKCON in community terms as a fledgling civil society by trying to understand the importance and need for community as the seedbed of what ISKCON itself is overall trying to achieve, the regeneration of a spiritually progressive human civilization. It could, by broadening its sense of mission, certainly do more to provide both the encouragement and resources necessary for creating the infrastructure and facilities a community needs for developing in a coherent way. To some extent it has obviously done and is doing this. The new Govardhan Farm project itself, always conceived as the basis for a genuine Krishna conscious community, is one good example. Also, the establishment of a school through great struggle, many ups and downs, which in its own right is now strong and capable of further development as an autonomous project, and best of all, capable of training and supporting young people in a healthy and secure sense of spiritual identity in a world of great, often overwhelming challenges. We were gratified that Vinod Prabhu did a presentation at the AGM last week on the school. It's fantastic. It was so inspiring after all these years. Those of you who can remember the early days of this particular project, when the only thing on the property was a broken down farmhouse, it's pretty amazing to be sitting here today in a hall like this, giving a talk on community development. So I remember Janavi, my stepdaughter, she's one of the first kids at the Gurukul here. It's a farmhouse, pretty much on the same spot this hall is in here now. Another broken down farmhouse, to fix it up a bit, that was the first Gurukul. So through so many ups and downs, and now we've got a fantastic school, and the kids are really mature and developing as participating citizens in the broader community, and with a strong sense of, not like go through, leave, get completely confused and bewildered and sort of, basically succumb to the pressures. So that was a tremendously inspiring thing, and I have to actually congratulate Vinod, especially and his team and the Gurukul there for doing just an amazing job. Another recent initiative which is encouraging is the development of official women's ministry, care of course all the hard work done by Krishnarupa Mataji Prabhu. And this is at an organisational level, an attempt to finally accord women some of the recognition, support and encouragement they deserve, not just as a missionary resource of marginal value, but, though this will still be some time coming, in terms of their real value as the foundation and pivot point of human civilization. Though these are some noteworthy examples of what ISKCON has done and perhaps is increasingly doing for the broader interests of the community, on the other hand, these could also be seen as examples of where ISKCON has honoured its responsibilities more in the breach than in the observance. For our history, at least in terms of a broader societal vision, has been more characterised by failure than success, though considering it is still early days, perhaps we need not judge this too harshly. So in summary, none of us have all the answers as far as resolving what no doubt will be an ongoing disconnect between a specific organisation and a general society, between two kinds of cultures, two kinds of intention and outcome, the military versus the civil, the masculine versus the feminine, the mission on behalf of humanity and the human beings themselves. This is going to be a long work in progress through the coming generations, but I believe just as in society more generally, we need more and more to give up relying on the government or on ISKCON and its institutional guise, and for the community itself to start gaining the drive and confidence to take up the mantle of leadership in its own right. And this conference is a great example of the community doing just that. I applaud its conveners for organising it, and I thank them very much for this opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Atmarama Prabhu. Very important and relevant topic. And so that leads us into Krishnarupa's talk. So Krishnarupa Devi Dasi is also leading the way in ISKCON with her dedication to promoting proper care and protection for devotee women. So last year Krishnarupa ran a women's retreat here on our farm, which received much support, not only from the women who attended, but also from other Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis around the world. So Krishnarupa has been a member of ISKCON since 1972. She has spent many years in India helping with the establishment of the world headquarters in Mayapur from 1974 to the 1980s. She has been a member of ISKCON Australia's National Council since 2016 as the Women's Minister for ISKCON Australia, and within this portfolio she has developed local women's representation in each ISKCON temple in Australia in order to better support Vaishnavis. So within this capacity, her focus remains on the spiritual and holistic well-being for all female members within our society. So on behalf of ISKCON Australia's Women's Ministry, please welcome Her Grace Krishnarupa.
I also care about the men devotees as well. Very, very importantly, actually, because if was pointed out earlier, if the men have healthy relationships, the marriage is a healthy relationship, the family is in a healthy relationship, and then, of course, the community is in a healthy state of mind. So I think that's very, very important to remember that we are working as an integrated group. It's not the men and not the women, but we're all working together serving Srila Prabhupada's mission. And I just wanted to thank you, Hladini, very much for organising this. It's a wonderful initiative. I do want to point out a comment that Atmarama Prabhu just mentioned about the National Vaishnavi Forum retreat that we had. I was one of 9 steering committee members, and everyone worked equally as hard as I did. So I just want to acknowledge that. And just regarding Bhakta Prabhu's comment earlier about this wonderful story with Chidahari Prabhu and Srila Prabhupada. Chidahari, actually, I interviewed him for an article for ISKCON's Radha Gopinath's 40th anniversary magazine. So it was actually just Srila Prabhupada sitting in the back seat of the car with Chidahari and the driver in the front. And Chidahari no one was scoffing the commuters verbally, but Chidahari explained that in his mind he was thinking, wow, look at these poor... Anyway, he had a little bit of a superior than now mood in his mind, thinking that here I am sitting with the Jagat Guru, the Guru of the universe, and everyone else is rushing to work. And he was thinking in that mood, and then he looked across at Srila Prabhupada, who was looking out at the opposite window of the car, and there were tears flowing down Srila Prabhupada's face. And Prabhupada turned to Chidahari and said, "How can they be saved?" So Prabhupada is the perfect example of compassion in its most pure form. And recently I've been listening to a lot of lectures actually of Srila Prabhupada's, but there were 2 running in sequence to each other. And as early as 1971, Srila Prabhupada was emphasising how we must care for each other. He used the example, if there's a devotee who's sick, we must care for that sick devotee. That we are family members, and as a family member will take care of any other member in the family, then we must take care of each other. It's taken us about 50 years to come to this point, but an initiative like this, which Hladini has organised, it's a really wonderful progress that we're making. So recently, during the Sacred Sound Retreat, a few of the members of the Vaishnavi ministry in Australia, we had a little brainstorm at my house, And we're working on a strategic document for the Vaishnavi ministry in Australia. And I just want to prefix this by saying that according to the International Vaishnavi Ministry, the work that we're doing here in Australia for the Vaishnavi Ministry is considered the benchmark, and I've been told that it's the light years ahead of anything else that's being done throughout the rest of the world. So it's very, even though we're far down south, we're not out of sight or mind. So we gathered together to brainstorm a few items about this strategic planning document that we want to put together. One was our vision statement and then our mission statement. The vision statement is like the stars, and the mission statement is the map to the stars. So this is our mission and vision statement here, that in line with Srila Prabhupada's 7 purposes of ISKCON, Australia's Vaishnavi ministry supports women in their spiritual journey. It's not just dedicated to Vaishnava women, but any woman that comes here with an inquiring mind, we're trying to help them in their spiritual journey. And the mission statement, the devotional mission of ISKCON Australia's Vaishnavi ministry, is to provide services and support through a strong foundational structure via education, association, and care for the holistic benefit of the Vaishnavis. So these are quite lofty goals, and we're trying our best to put these into place along with the others. And of course, you're probably all very familiar with the 7 purposes of ISKCON. So because of our time constraints, I won't go into that. So the Women's Minister was appointed about 3 years ago, and it was interesting because when the National Council of Australia, when they appointed a woman's representative on the council, they didn't actually have any idea what that role would mean. So it gave me great latitude. And thanks to the National Council, they really got on board with my, developing vision through the grace of Krishna and Srila Prabhupada. And they pretty much gave me carte blanche of what my service role would be. In fact, to the degree that I actually wrote my own service description, which was really good, and the National Council passed that as a resolution that yes, this is what would encompass. And the first initiative was to create local women's representation in each temple. So the temple managers of each temple did that, and then I worked closely with all of those representatives. We have 2 here at the moment. We have our exiting local women's representative from Sydney, Rasika Manjari, who's done wonderful work for 2 years. We have the Gold Coast Bhakti Centre incoming representative here, Braja Vilasini, and she's also very excited about the role. So having a local women's representation in each temple is fantastic because it means that there's an avenue for the Vaishnavi voice, that if there are any issues that women may be experiencing in their temples, in their personal life, they've got someone that they go to, and then they then come to me, and together we work on a plan. And it's always in collusion with the temple presidents. We don't start any initiatives without their blessings. So one of the other ideas was that we would have a National Vaishnavi retreat. And that was in my first presentation to the National Council, and I actually forgot all about it. And then last year, Atmarama came to visit me for a bit of a brainstorming about different things, and he said, well, why don't you have a national conference? I went, oh, yeah, that's right. I actually remember that was one thing that I wanted to do. So with his great encouragement and help, we established this steering committee. We had, I think, 100 hours of Skype meetings, I think, Ambika, and we came up with, what we thought was an event that really pleased a lot of people. We had about 100 visitors from all around Australia, and one lady actually came from Malaysia, so that was very exciting. And our next one will be in 2020, so I hope you all attend that. It was a combination of workshops, kirtans, seminars, presentations. We had keynote speakers like Shaka Devi Dasi and Sitala Devi Dasi. And we're also getting some feedback, of course, from devotees about what they would like for the future one. And we're also doing a SWOT analysis, which is strength, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, throughout a cross-section of devotee women in all of our temples. I will be interviewing, I have actually a list of about 40 ladies in our community here that I hope to be able to interview and really feel the temperature of what, what they want. And so it's really plans for the future. So no, don't worry, we're not going to be wearing saffron bed sheets anymore. This photo is actually taken from 1968. And our clothing style may have changed. I know we do like our gopi skirts these days, but our mood and enthusiasm has not dimmed. So although we've graduated from the bed sheets, we are still very enthusiastic. So our plans for the future. So for the new Govardhan community, we're setting up a Vaishnavi youth group for girls between 16 and 21. And the team leader for that will be Mandali Kishori, who's a very, enthusiastic young devotee here who's joined our community recently, and one of the cowherd girls. Will be the interviews with the Vaishnavis that I've mentioned to you. So when you get a call from me, please be kind and please agree to come to my house for a cup of rooibos tea and a chat with me. And we're also setting up a quarterly newsletter, an e-newsletter, which will be distributed to all of the temples in Australia, and that will be called the Vaishnavi Voice. So we're getting mock-ups being drafted now for that. And we're also going to be organising a men's workshop. We have a couple of male devotees here, Paramakaruna Prabhu and Dandakaranya, who are very excited to set up a men's workshop, which will be really wonderful because it's very, very important that we have healthy relationships right from the get-go. The timing for that workshop is not yet confirmed, and the couple of seminars that I created, the sexual harassment prevention and identification seminar, that's been rolled out to all of the temples in Australia, and approximately 170 devotees have attended that. I have to yet go to Brisbane, which I'll do at the end of the month, and that was met with fantastic response, absolutely overwhelming response. And it's really inspired me to understand that actually we do very much need education about these type of things because we are still conditioned souls. And the domestic and family violence prevention and identification seminar, that's almost completed, and that will I will roll that out to all of our temples in Australia, and that is by National Council resolution as well. So the National Council is very much inspired by these initiatives and giving full support. So I'd just like to thank them about that too. I think this is pretty much the end of my talk, yes. I've just got a short list. I've got a couple of minutes, I think. Short list of some of the things that we've been doing across Australia. For example, in Sydney with Rasika, under Rasika Manjari's auspice, she's really developed the women's program in Sydney. It's really increased their confidence, and there's a lot more scope for engaging everyone in their preferred services. They give Srimad Bhagavatam classes regularly. They have Sunday feast classes regularly. They do the whole Sunday feast program, like occasionally we do here as well. They've expressed how they feel more self-assured and welcome to engage in leading prayers at the temple at any time. and to engage in other events such as Srila Prabhupada's Guru Puja. And new service roles are being created because in New Govardhan, we have our reading circles, brahmachari involvement, Bhagavatam classes, and of course the ladies lead kirtan whenever they like. And in Brisbane, there's been a lot of work that's happening. This past year it's been more foundational, so there's been lots of meeting with women in the community, responsible for child protection, deity worship, university preaching and the Sunday school. Small leadership academy has sprouted, where there's one-on-one sessions and a small training group has emerged. In Melbourne, of course, all of this has been going on, and they're working on a Sunday school curriculum. In Perth, there's increased recognition of the Vaishnavi ministry. There's more gatherings of the women, every 6 weeks. They plan on having a Vaishnavi retreat in Perth and also another one-day retreat in Brisbane. So there's lots and lots of really positive activities that have been going on in Australia. And I would just like to thank you very much for listening. And I would like to close with a quote from Srila Prabhupada. Actually, it's from Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 10:34. Among women, I'm fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, and patience. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Krishnarupa. So, there are two Vaishnavis who are in our program, and both of them, or should I say neither of them, could actually be here because of emergency situations with family members, and one of those is Vishalini. So Vishalini and her husband Gunarnava Prabhu had planned to be here, but Gunarnava Prabhu has lately developed very serious health problems, and so she has been unable to come, but she has sent us a video recording of what she wanted to contribute to this conference. But first of all, I'm just going to introduce her, like I've been doing with the other speakers. So Vishalini has served in Sri Vrindavan Dham from the early 1970s. She was there for nearly 15 years, serving in diverse services as needed, seeking grants from the government, developing tourism for the guest house there, and purchasing quality boga and cooking with love for the Gurukul boys. Now, she and her husband Gunarnava, they had 3 children, lived in Vrindavan for many years, and Vishalini says that she kept Vrindavan firmly planted in her heart when they left in 1986. Now, His Grace Gunarnava Prabhu, so he has been a dedicated counsellor, especially for men, for many years. And Vishalini, she has a master's degree in counselling. She is accredited in multiple models of counselling, and since the year 2000, she has facilitated over 300 counselling workshops. She was a team leader for 5 domestic and family violence courts in Queensland, Australia. She has contributed to the development of statewide systems and policies responding to domestic violence, co-researched with the Queensland Justice Department. She has also developed local networks for best practice in responding to domestic and family violence. So we're now going to be playing the video that she sent us.
Omachana Tremendasya Ganagana Shalakaya Chaksur Nalitam Unitasmai Shri Guravi Namaha Vanchakalpa Truvyascha Kripasindu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha. Thank you for inviting us. My good husband and I are very sorry that we can't be there personally. We're dealing with a medical emergency. I'm going to have to ask you to bear with me because the idea of making a video right now is quite daunting, but I'm going to give it a go. May I start with sharing my favorite photo with you? A grave image, Srila Prabhupada walking down the streets in New York. We look now and we see what he was able to achieve because he knew that Krishna is the doer. And he taught us, if we truly believe that Krishna is the doer and we don't get in the way, then anything is possible. So in the beginning days, Srila Prabhupada used to use his time, it's very well documented, meeting with government leaders, religious leaders, anyone who possibly could be influential. The Hare Krishnas were always in the media. And we had something very different to offer this world. And we were very proud to be Srila Prabhupada's puppets. In those early days, very few of us had any qualifications whatsoever. It was Prabhupada who made us dance. Prabhupada multiple times would say that he wanted us to follow the laws of the land. We needed to teach by example, but to animate Srila Prabhupada's teachings and be able to interact with this world. I've been asked to share with you how preaching through legal compliancy can look. In 2003, my husband and I immigrated to Australia. We did a master's degree in counseling. We had to have 3 placements. One was in a neighborhood center giving free counseling. Second was in a domestic violence regional service, which was run by the Catholic Archdiocese. Third was Lifeline. During this time, a godbrother who was running Gopal's cafe became critically ill and had surgery and no longer could run the cafe. It landed in our lap. That became the basis of providing material aid to the community. We would provide 600 to 1,000 free meals to 6 interagencies that served disadvantaged. Typically, it was domestic violence hostel, St. Vinny's, Salvation Army, Lions accommodation, and the needle exchange. We documented and had them signed for everything, and we started building a portfolio of community services that we were providing free of charge. We would communicate this to the business clientele that came to the cafe, and that became the funding base for what would in the future be a registered charity. We would also have Prabhupada's books on every table and always communicate with the public very clearly who we were and what we were doing and why we were doing it. Someone chased us for a while, and when he finally caught up, he said, "I want you to listen to this. This is going to help you." And basically, they offered us $46,000 a term to supervise 10 work for the dole participants. We said we'd do it if it could be work for the dole with a difference. And we gave them personal development workshops, team building workshops, and a very special environment of respect. where they not only learned hospitality, but they were listening to the holy name all day long. They were serving prasadam, they were packing prasadam, they were doing service, and we were getting paid for it. And we had very good, more than very good outcomes on it. There's so many stories of what good work came all together, which time limits and we can't get into. That leads us to writing the Constitution. Okay, the Constitution, we had to learn the language of government. We tried to get a solicitor or solicitors. They wanted $15,000 to create the framework. So we read corporate law for 6 months until our brains burned. And basically, the Constitution, we read what was valuable to government, and we reflected on how Prabhupada's teachings best serviced those who are suffering, and communicated that in the Constitution. So much so that it was ratified that we could use Vedanta as a model for counseling. So in this way, Bhaktivedanta Benevolent Association received a grant. They gave us a new car and totally refitted the kitchen. We got grants for multicultural events. Virgin Blue did an article in their magazine, which is in the airplanes, a really wonderful article on who we were, what we did, and why we did it. We're on the radio and in the newspapers all the time, and we developed a really very coherent, credible relationship in the community. Organizational development is the study of a healthy and successful organization. The word organization denotes numbers. Numbers without organization is chaos. So to adopt simplified processes that in a systematic way help us review what practices stay the closest to the original concept of what we've been taught. That is a worthwhile investment. So Prabhupada said, everything is gyros. With Krishna in front, that becomes tens, hundreds, thousands, millions. So my humble request is you consider becoming pioneers of bringing Prabhupada's movement back into the media. Invest in practices that show those happy, smiling faces of devotees, and doing wonderful seva in the community that stands out from all the rest. Hare Krishna, thank you very much. Then there's the issue of an organization having a duty of care to its members, the devotees. With every organization comes anomalies or unwanted interference. As an organization, we have a duty of care to provide a safe, ethical, moral, transcendental atmosphere for its members. We have an obligation to have processes in place to see that devotees are cared for. And when there are anomalies, that they're dealt with ethically. And to demonstrate that, to document these things and to follow through with the process rather than try to hide it is a strength rather than a weakness. No organization can exist without anomalies happening. So we have a duty of care to invest in that area for devotees.
Now, Vishalini did send me some cards, and she also has sent some handouts here, right? There's a handout that she has entitled "A Story Explaining the Value of Using Professionalism in Seva." Very, very nice. I actually have seen her full video, so it's very worthwhile looking at. Maybe somebody could hand these out if somebody is specifically interested. So thank you very much, Vishalini Prabhu. Okay, so now I'm the next presenter here, and I'm just going to be very quick. So I want to present an idea that I feel is applicable for all ISKCON centres around the world as much as it is for New Govardhan. So having served within community services on New Govardhan for some years and being aware of the very similar community needs within other ISKCON centres, I came to this conclusion that it would be very beneficial for every ISKCON centre to have a qualified devotee welfare worker serving, preferably full-time, but at least part-time within each ISKCON centre. And this devotee, I feel, should have minimum basic professional training in welfare skills such as counselling, mediation, dispute resolution, working with groups, basic mental health knowledge, and some knowledge of due process, what we call due process. Right, so now Vishalini's presentation today is a lot on professionalising seva. Now, I happen to be university qualified in these areas, and having been a devotee for some 30 years, I can say fairly confidently that some of these welfare skills, they do manifest in a devotee over time, simply from being a devotee and sticking to the process. But not all of them, not all of these little skills that we call welfare skills. At least they don't manifest, perhaps within our short lifetimes here. And so there are quite a few tools, what we call tools, that can be used by studying community services and welfare services that we can then take and apply to helping our Vaishnava population. Now, I did present this idea to the GBC in a report a few years ago. I didn't get very much response, but I have also had the good fortune of serving His Holiness Bir Krishna Maharaj over the past few years, and recently he was telling me about his own idea of ISKCON having what he calls a dual leadership model, right, in which you have two leaders running every centre. And when I saw his model, I couldn't help but see the similarity with my own idea. So this is what Maharaj's model is. All right, so here we have, this doesn't come out. So Maharaj is, he's saying, this is his quote here, that this solution is in keeping with Varnashram, where we have one managerial leader who is focusing, right, he's acting in a Kshatriya role, right, he's addressing concerns relating to administration, finances, everyday temple programs, legalities, facility maintenance, and etc. And then we have a second spiritual leader who is functioning more in the Brahmin role, right? And he is addressing the welfare concerns not only of the congregational members but also of the managers or the manager. And his role is solely to act as a welfare minister, right? Counselling people and offering them personal support. So Maharaj said that he has already presented this to the GBC. I think he said at least twice. And as I was saying, yeah, when he was telling me about this, I was thinking, gosh, well, that's kind of like my thought of having the welfare worker within each centre. And, Radha and myself have been having quite in-depth conversations lately about mental health, our mental health program. And, I can remember one conversation in particular, Radha and I were sitting like for an hour and just nutting things out. And this is actually the same sort of conclusion that we ended up at, that, this would actually be very, very beneficial adjustment, shall we say, to our current managerial structure. And then, the idea would be that the Brahmin spiritual leader, he would remain at the helm of welfare initiatives that are happening within his own centre, encouraging devotees and perhaps coordinating them and so forth. So anyway, I just wanted to present this to you today as an idea. It's just an idea. We might want to think about it. We might, be able to think what the possibilities are of that in the future. So I'm going to finish there. Now, our next speaker for today was going to be Kishori, our own Dr. Kishori. So she's the second Vaishnavi who sadly has not been able to come because her own father is just leaving his body right now in New Zealand. So she had to fly to New Zealand last night. Okay, so I'm just going to read Kishori's bio here while we're trying to get the video up. So Dr. Kishori, who is very dear to us all, she springs from Fiji, where she and her entire family became disciples of Bia Krishna Maharaj. We just heard. Oh, by the way, I was presenting this with the blessings of Maharaj. He told me he was happy if I presented it, on his behalf. So just thought I'd mention that. So anyway, Kishori and her entire family are all disciples of Bia Krishna Maharaj. And as a young medical student, Kishori ran Bhakti Vriksha programs, both at her medical college as well as a nearby nursing college. Then, upon the instruction of her Guru Maharaj, Kishori and her family moved to Australia, eventually putting down their roots here at New Govardhan. Now, Kishori serves, as we know, as a GP. She also serves as intermittently as an emergency specialist, medical specialist. She has been practicing as a medical doctor for 21 years, and she says she enjoys tending to devotees' medical needs free of charge. Kishori is a very caring, generous, and dedicated Vaishnavi, and we are very fortunate to have her within our community. In addition to her incredibly busy schedule as a doctor, she also finds time to serve in other areas such as deity worship. Excuse me. So, we will try and get this video up and running. Let's have a look.
Hare Krishna, everybody, and thank you for allowing me to be part of this conference. Still, I hope this video works for everybody. So, the title of my presentation today is Medicine and Devotion. And I wanted to start off by saying that the definition of health, as defined by the WHO, the World Health Organization, is that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So, in recent years, spirituality has been understood and added on to this definition of health, which now is that health is a state of complete physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being, and not just the absence of disease. So, Srila Prabhupada, how he said that the main cause of illness in this world were due to three things, which are anxiety, uncleanliness, and a poor diet. These are the three things that Srila Prabhupada said caused illness in this world. And practically we can see that completely in line with the WHO definition as well. So currently I find myself in the position of being a doctor, living and working in a spiritual community. And I see my role as seeing patients in my clinic, seeing patients at the temple, and seeing patients at their homes, providing medical care, including palliative care, as a general practitioner and also as a spiritual practitioner. We have the same emphasis, which is cradle to grave care, from birth to disease to old age to death. Both a GP and a devotee cares for an individual. So the most important thing that we face as devotees is this ultimate test of going back to Godhead, trying to in this lifetime, or at least trying our best to advance on this path of going back to Godhead. So it is very, very important for all of us as devotees to have a plan, to have a will, to have it written down, to go to your GPs and discuss with them where you want to die, how you want to die, whether you want resuscitation or not. And ultimately, it needs to be stated whether you do want any spiritual attendance at the time that you're dying. I mean, what if you're dying in hospital? What if you're dying in a nursing home? If it isn't stated clearly, then it might get missed. And ultimately, what do you want to happen to your body? All very sobering things, which all need to be considered. I mean, I know of situations where devotees have had non-devotee relatives and they've wanted the body to be buried next to other devotees, which is not very nice association after death. But, I mean, that's a joke. But, I mean, yes, so, most devotees would want to be cremated and the ashes to be taken to the Yamuna or the Ganges or elsewhere. So it is important to think about this and to have this in writing. So the other thing I guess I should say is that actually I'll leave that for now. So I might run out of my time. So in this world, most disease is coming from mental or social spheres, not physical illness. In fact, 90% of illness in this world is due to mental or social issues, and only 10% physical illness. So it's very easy to treat physical illness by giving medication or other medical things, but obviously for social and psychological issues is much more difficult. So this is why, I mean, if somebody is wondering, what am I doing in my office all day? It's not just giving out Panadol and antibiotics. It's actually trying to help souls with their physical, with their social, and their emotional, and their psychological issues, which is extremely difficult if they don't have a concept of God. And Srila Prabhupada, in his introduction to the Srimad Bhagavatam, he said that despite all material advancement, despite all technology, money, developed countries, etc., there is still a pinprick in society at large. And he said this pinprick is due to a lack of God consciousness. So we are seeing this practically, that 90% of the disease burden is coming in because of social, mental, psychological issues, because they are not connected or because they are just wandering. And many times in the scriptures it's been described that this human condition is diseased, and this disease is people are in ignorance and not realizing they have a personal relationship with the Lord. So in what I do, I try to help people meet their needs in practical ways. And in particular, I need to tell you that mental or psychological issues are 1,000 times more painful than physical issues because it can't be seen, and help is available. So help is available. You can go and see your GP, you can take the person to the nearest emergency department, even if it is not an emergency. You can call up many phone numbers which are free of charge, such as Lifeline, such as Beyond Blue, etc. So, and if you need more information, please don't hesitate to go in to see your doctor. So, many a time as devotees, we are told or we hear that all you really need to do is chant Hare Krishna. And this is true. Ultimately, this is true. However, we do need to keep it real. We need to understand that we are spiritual beings having a material experience. We are spiritual beings in a material body. And this material body, like a car, needs care, needs maintenance. We need to understand, as one of our previous acharyas has said, just as the two wheels of the train are going simultaneously, so in the same way, our physical needs, our material needs, and our spiritual needs need to be met simultaneously to have a balanced existence. So there is a well-known theory called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, well known in medicine, well known in psychology, and this theory states that to achieve the peak of our existence, which is self-realization, we actually need to meet the lower needs first, and these lower needs are need for food, shelter, accommodation, physiological needs. The second step is need for safety, security. The third is need for love and feeling belonged. The fourth is need for esteem, need to feel accomplished. And then the final is self-realization. That is a need to be able to achieve one's full potential. So to be able to actually come to the pinnacle of this human form of life, which is self-realization, all these below needs actually have to be met. And that is keeping it real. Many a time we force people to just chant Hare Krishna and be happy, and then what happens is that these real needs that come with the material body aren't met, and then they eventually come out in perverted ways, or the individual suffers disease. So I'm very happy that this conference is being held to develop strategies in our community to meet these needs. And finally, I will say that there is. I'll say one more thing about the fact of this maybe a little immature mentality of just chanting Hare Krishna and not really addressing the material needs, is that in the Hare Krishna movement, we have the best philosophy, the highest. So we have a very big head, and we also have the best prasadam, so we have a very big belly. But in the middle, what we are lacking is our heart. So having a heart means being compassionate. and means meeting the individual at the level at which they are at. And this is the best preaching. This is the best that is going to help them then advance to the level of self-realization. So I will finish off now by saying that in health promotion, there's a very well-known strategy called the Ottawa Charter. Please look it up. You are all now going to be managing different portfolios, like the widows, like the old men, like the children, like the gurukulis. So this is a structure that has been used and been found to be extremely helpful over and over. And it has 5 basic principles. And with these 5 principles, any community project can be developed and sustained. And, when you look it up, and also I'm happy to be used as a resource. I've used this strategy in the past for both spiritual and material projects and medical projects. So I'm happy to be used as a resource if you need. And these basically, the 5 principles are building a healthy policy. Second, creating a supportive environment. Third, strengthening community action. Fourth, developing personal skills. And 5, reorienting services towards prevention. So thank you. I'll end here. Hare Krishna.
So, Asesa Sadhini is certainly amongst the foremost of our counsellors. She engages in her service almost full-time and has helped many, many devotees, not only within our new Govardhan Yatra, but also in other yatras, with her wise and sage counsel. She describes herself as a holistic counsellor. Almost 30 years ago, she became certified in various healing modalities, such as she's a Reiki master, a Seikim master. She became certified in bioenergetics, remedial massage, and aromatherapy. Now, in the 1990s, Asesa has entered into her service on ISKCON's child protection team. And she did at that time complete training as an ISKCON CPO judge. Over the past decade, she has served on the GBC Devotee Care team, as well as being a part of a new Govardhan mentorship program. So as one of our community services most respected and dedicated members, please welcome to the stage Her Grace Asesa Sadhini.
Okay, thank you. So, Jai Srila Gurudev, Jai Srila Prabhupada. In 2007, the GBC started the Strategic Planning Initiative. Committees were formed, Devotee Care is one. As a team, we're dedicated to promoting the well-being of ISKCON devotees in all areas of experience, that is physical, emotional and spiritual. We value that addressing the needs, interests and concerns of devotees means happy devotees and happy communities. Srila Prabhupada emphasised, our society is like one big family and our relationships should be built on love and trust. We're just so vulnerable within this material world because we forget our relationship with Krishna. We have the tendency within this vulnerability to shift into the space of fear, guilt and blame. This automatically disconnects us from having healthy relationships. The less we share our vulnerabilities in a Krishna conscious way, the more we start to believe our internal dialogue, I'm not good enough. From this sprouts the tendency to contaminate rather than to contribute to our community.
There has to be a confidential relationship. Without confidential relationship, it's very difficult to reveal one's mind in confidence. If you say something confidential to somebody, you know it's going to come back to you 1,000-fold. not even 1,000-fold, millions-fold. It'll be on Facebook tomorrow. It's very difficult to have confidential relationships when you don't have confidence. If we reveal a weakness, we become vulnerable. Part of having confidential relationships is to be able to have trusting relationships. Everybody needs somebody they can trust. If you don't have somebody you can't trust, you won't survive. Then you'll always keep it within. You won't say anything to anybody, and you may have a completely distorted perception of yourself, thinking that that's what everybody else is thinking about you, but it doesn't even exist. It's only existing in your imagination. It has no connection to reality. And if you stay that way for too long, you'll be gone.
In recent years, an Australian Indigenous community had the highest suicide rate in the world. Elders within that community conferred. The aunties instigated a care program of walk and talk, or sit and talk in nature, relative to the individual's situation. Being in nature helps relieve tension, anxiety, and depression. It helps people see the world is a bigger place. It's not just about you. I am not alone in the world. The elder holds the sanctity of the space one-on-one with the vulnerable one who reveals their mind in confidence. Within a relatively short time, the suicide rate within that community has been reduced to a staggering 0. On New Govardhan, as a spiritual community, we also walk through courage, compassion, and connection together. In the process of this, we learn to replace our vulnerabilities with wholeheartedness. All of us here are involved in devotee care. As cogs in the wheel, we're all individually and collectively nurturing and developing our culture of care. We're honouring unity in diversity, authentic family relationships in our broad, eclectic community. My heartfelt gratitude to you all for your input, support, and inspiration. Special thanks to Hladini Prabhu for stringing together the pearls on the thread in this wonderful initiative. To Ajita Prabhu for his ongoing involvement and support over the decades in caring for the devotees in the local yatras. To my husband, Nishringa Kavacha Prabhu, it's quite an achievement guiding and supporting me through my IT vulnerabilities. And the devotee care team capably guided by Revati Raman Prabhu. My gratitude also to Niranjan Swami and Radhanath Swami for their wisdom and inspiration.
A truly happy person does not find his or her happiness in the ever-changing circumstances that surround them. This is a problem with the way people perceive life. We're seeking happiness in all sorts of temporary, fleeting experiences that are so often beyond our control. Real happiness is not determined by the external situation. It's a state of mind. It's a consciousness. It is what is within ourselves. Yoga means harmony. To harmonize the body with the mind, with the very living force of who we are. And through this process, to harmonize our consciousness with all of nature and with the conscious force that is within all living beings. It is in that harmony that we find true happiness. Because that harmony is eternal. It's unchanging. The concept of unity in diversity. There is limitless diversity, and that diversity is wonderful because it provokes and it invokes opportunities to go deeper and deeper within ourselves. It provides opportunities for relationships, but for those relationships to truly bring about happiness of the heart, it's important to experience the unity within all this diversity. When we understand that harmony and the negative apparent things that we see, we begin to realize that that is on the level of the ego, on the level of the illusions of disconnect from the joy of the soul. I have seen people on their deathbeds whose bodies were racked with pain, who are truly the happiest people in the world. Because in that situation, they were seeking the happiness within, and they discovered it. We can find that even in our healthiest states. Whether we're rich, whether we're poor, whether we're healthy, whether we're diseased, whatever our situation is, to find the harmony of the heart with the hearts of all beings, with the hearts of creation, is true happiness.